Hey, you awesome folks! Thanks for taking this journey of discovery with your guide, Keith Haney. You're listening to the Becoming Bridge Builders podcast, your favorite podcast for everything from racial reconciliation to education innovation, justice reform, and leading change in the 21st century. This podcast is for people who love to be challenged with difficult topics, but want practical solutions to solve these challenging issues. Becoming Bridge Builders makes change possible. Each week on the podcast, Keith invites innovative thought leaders to share how they are building bridges in their area of expertise. You will hear breakthrough ideas and concepts that are changing the world. He's featuring guests who are best-selling authors, leaders at Microsoft, entrepreneurs, leading educators, professors, lawyers, and so many more. Listen in to learn how you can be the bridge to the change you are seeking.
My guest today is Mark B. Murphy, CEO of Northeast Private Client Group, is an accomplished author, speaker, and motivator who is revolutionizing the financial planning and wealth management industry. He helps entrepreneurs achieve multi-generational wealth through personalized strategies, leveraging his strategic planning and financial engineering expertise. Forbes has ranked him as the #1 financial security professional in New Jersey and 15th nationwide. Additionally, his book, The Ultimate Investment, is a #1 bestseller and now a new release on Amazon. We welcome Mark to the podcast. Well, it's so good to welcome Mark back to the podcast. How you doing today, Mark?
Very well. I'm honored to be a two-time, like Saturday Night Live. You're a five-time host is a big deal. I guess a two-time guest on your podcast is just as important.
It is. It's really important. I don't have guests on often, so, it's good to have you back.
Thank you.
So I had to change the question because you came on before, so I had to invite new opening question for this. Is a brand new opening question just for you.
I'm ready.
All right. So what's been happening in your life recently that you expected, didn't expect?
Everything to me is BS. It's all BS. It's all belief systems. Everything starts to me belief systems. So I think that the thing is that you train your mind on the expected to say, in this life you don't get what you want, or you don't get what you need, or you don't get what you deserve. You get what you expect. And so I think for the most part that I sort of train my mind to expect good things to happen, to expect what I want to happen. And sometimes it doesn't, but that's the unexpected. But I think if you're being more granular about it, I think that, I've got 5 kids between 17 and 25. And I thought that once you kind of raise the kids and get them out of the house, our youngest goes to college next year. Well, 4 kids in college, one's already graduated. The unexpected to me was that I thought that not the problems would go away, but I thought that the parenting would ease up from the day to day. And I realized that I've never been more in the middle of everything. And by the way, most of it with great joy, others with some, the things you got to do to be a good parent, and the discipline and the problems you have to help kids with from time to time. But I thought that was unexpected. I thought that not that I would never stop being a parent, but I thought a lot of the day-to-day responsibilities would ease up. And I think they've just gotten, harder. You're dealing with, and I think the challenge, I think, when you see this unexpected stuff is, as somebody that is very empathetic and solves problems every day, and that's what I do for a living, as a key business strategist and critical thinker and financial advisor to folks, is you want to go in there and solve your kids' problems, and oftentimes you have the resources to do that. But I think it's very, very hard, and sometimes I don't do it as well as I could. But sometimes you got to step back and let them solve their own problems and figure it out for themselves, and that's how they get strong. And almost like they talk about like a bird, that the way their wings get strong so they can fly is to break out of the shell. If the shell's opened other than by their own wings, they wind up not being able to fly, and they get eaten by prey because they can't fly. They're running around on the ground. And I try to remember that, but sometimes I forget. And so I'm trying to be a better parent by sometimes doing less for my kids, not more.
That makes sense. My kids are getting older too, and you're right. Parenting never goes away; it changes. I think the neat thing about parenting is you're right. You have to learn. When they were younger, you wanted to kind of teach them and do things for them. Now you're kind of getting in the middle of sometimes relationship issues, financial planning, futures, decisions they're going to make on their first home, their first kid, their college. I mean, all those things that you didn't think you were going to have to decide anymore. Now you're kind of coming alongside, and you say you're being a coach now, which is more than a parent. It's kind of fun in some ways if you like that idea of coaching them to help them to figure, like you said yourself, figure out the answers already inside of them.
Right. Yeah, and I think part of becoming an adult is being able to stand on your own 2 feet, and stand up for yourself. And
Right.
and by the way, if I don't do a good job with my kids, what shot do my grandkids have?
Right. Exactly. I'm always curious, people like yourself, what books have you read in your life that have changed your life the most?
Well, first of all, I think that's an awesome question because clearly, if you want to see what your life looks like in 10 years, it's two things. It's the books you read and the people you hang out with. But I consider myself a voracious reader. Although my friends bust me because I had my third book out last year, and so they always say to me, well, you've written 3 books now. That's 2 more than you've read, which is not true. So of course, I need to then say to them, well, now that I'm a best-selling author, I've got to get a better set of friends than you. So this will be our last conversation. But having said that, I think that reading is what separates entrepreneurs from just people that own a business, or entrepreneurs from people who just have a job. And so, I could tell you so many books that made a difference in my life. Some books just changed how I thought about things, because the problem is never the problem. It's how you think about the problem. But if I'm looking for specific books, like, Outliers from Malcolm Gladwell was an important book for me. And it was an important book for me because it made me realize that to master a subject, you had to put 10,000 hours in, and all of the things and the confidence that you needed, that you had confidence once you had that, or as somebody that has hired and unfortunately have had to fire people over the last 38 or 39 years. The book Traction by Gino Wickman was profound, and he has a system called EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, which which allowed me to get very clear on who needed to be in our organization. It made me very clear that you're not growing a business, you're growing people. And so then how do I make sure that I've got the right people in my organization, which I think was terrific. I think a book that came out relatively recently that described our business to a T. I just wasn't eloquent enough to write it myself. Meaning they laid out, was Dan Sullivan had a book with a co-author on a book called Who Not How, and it because the question that has been asked to me probably 10,000 times in some form, Keith, has been, how do I grow my income? How do I grow my business? How do I grow my freedom of time? How do I grow my freedom of relationships? How do I grow my freedom of purpose? One of the 5 freedoms. And I always thought that was the wrong question, that the right question should be, who do we need to collaborate with to grow our income, our business, our freedom of time, relationship, and purpose? And it allowed me to realize that was the key. That was the key to a successful entrepreneurship. I could go on. I have 100 favorite books.
So you've read more than 2.
I continue to read. I continue to read. I think that's, you always have an opportunity to learn. And I think the other thing too is that sometimes it's like, what are some of I read that great book. It was out I don't know 10 years ago on Genghis Khan. But the idea is that there was so much learning involved. In terms of just how he operated, and he and the Mongols created both terror and fear and a culture. Not that I want to become Genghis Khan, but I think you can learn from how they in many ways created modern society. And so as opposed, I thought it was more, it was a biography, sort of, or it was a biography. but the learning of how I could use the practicality in our business and in my life made a difference.
I love that. This is a new question too. I love this. I want to talk to somebody like yourself. How would you describe your leadership style? And on top of that, also, how does that style impact those around you in your business?
When I was younger, my leadership style was called impatience. And it wasn't a very effective style. I think it was, when I realized that the key factor in improvement was a couple of things. Number one is when the clients were always numero uno. Clients could do no wrong in my mind. And when I realized that the people that worked with and for me were not only as important, but in many cases more important than the clients. Not that the clients were still not numero uno, but when I realized that was a game changer in terms of my leadership style. The second thing is when I realized that I'm always at my best when I'm serving others. And so the idea is that when I could use servant leadership and lift people up and not be the leader because my name was on your check or because I was the CEO, but my leadership came from that I was pouring into people and investing in them both personally and professionally. And I was there to help them be the best version of themselves. And I was help them to meet their goals and aspirations. Then I became the kind of leader that I would want to work for. And that ultimately, that maybe early in my career, because I had no roadmap or no guide to do this, I was just kind of fumbling around. But once, that was like a eureka light bulb kind of key moment, is that, who would I want to work for? And I wanted to become that kind of person that I wanted to work for, that people would lead with me. And I think the other thing with leadership is you've got to be the dirtiest key in the office, meaning that ultimately you can't ask anybody to do something that you wouldn't do yourself or have not done yourself. Now, maybe some of the tasks in my office I'm not doing anymore, but technology improvements aside, I did it. And so I wouldn't ask you to do it, Keith, if I wouldn't do it myself.
This is great. Nordhaus kind of makes a point that for leadership, you probably don't just have one style. You have to kind of adjust and adapt to situations. So how does your leadership style adapt to the situations you need at the moment?
Well, I think it's, I mean, part of it's circumstances, but I think part of it is that, my superpower might be to be able to read people and read what languaging says. Like I seem to, maybe it's just also having done this for so long and worked in a business that's people, you can read a few things. You can read what they're saying between the lines and you can get the feeling on that. And, like as an example, I remember, a few years ago, people were telling us that this key employee was leaving. And I kept saying, no, they're not leaving. And they go, no, they're leaving. I go, they're not leaving. They go, and they didn't leave. And I go, well, how did you know this? And I said, I knew that because they stopped, they were still disagreeing with me. Meaning if you and I had checked out of our relationship, I'd be like, we're done. But if they still cared, they still wanted to be there. And I still, want, or what, even when people say the opposite, they are leaving because of how they behave. And I think part of the give as a leader is to find out how to get almost like a coach in sports, to figure out how to get the best out of your people. Some people really respond well to tough love. Other people get paralyzed by it. And I think part of it is really trying to understand how do you get the best out of people. And, I think part of it is not because you have some secret, playbook on that. I think it's really getting to know people in relationships and getting to understand how they react to things. And I think it starts by, showing people what a great job looks like, getting clear on expectations, communicating with people, and then trying to find the method to get the very, very best out of them. And not the very best out of them because it serves you or it serves the business, but because they know that you have their interest at heart. That, to me, that everything must be what we call a class 3 experience. It's got to be great for our customer first. It's got to be great for them second, and it's got to be great for me and the firm third. And there's no situation that I want to be involved in where for you to win, I have to lose, or for me to win, you have to lose. I want to create a situation where everybody can do better by working together.
That's great. What you're kind of describing a little bit is your company culture. How would you define what a good company culture looks like?
I think part of it is where everybody has the same core values. Meaning there were times in my life where I had very smart people who worked for me, but didn't believe in the culture. And so I was wondering why it was a misfit, and it did not work. And I think, so like, one of the things like people will say, like, how do you get people to be so engaged and work so hard? And I would say, well, if they weren't working hard or engaged, they wouldn't be working here. Meaning, meaning, or we have a culture where, for me, I'm always at my best. I mention this when I'm serving others. I want people in our culture to be there. That's the kind of culture that we set. We want to create an experience for our clients. We want to be emotionally fit. You're dealing with people's lives, their money, their most sensitive and deepest, darkest secrets. Part of that is you have to be emotionally fit when that occurs. You want to create that. And every time we have not been true to that, either in hiring or in coaching our folks, if they seem to get out of a balance with our core values, that's when our company takes a step backward. I mean, the definition to me of an unstoppable team is when you have your entire team in momentum. And the thing that's the hardest part is that there are very good people who are very talented, or who you have great affection for personally, or who do some things so extraordinarily well. But there are some things that are deal breakers in that place, because as good as they may be in so many areas, they become a cancer to the organization, which allows other people to say, well, if that person can get away with that or do that, well, then why can't I? And that's the beginning of the breaking of your culture. And so I think you have to kind of coach to people and to say to them, here's who we are and here's the kind of organization we're running. If this is not the right place for you, let me help you find a place that might be better for you, that might tolerate you not showing up on time on a consistent basis, or being great at what you do, but not being a team player. Because, that may be great. In another firm, that might be fine. You can work in your little cubicle and silo and be a superstar. But here, we're a collaborative firm. So if that's what you do, you're probably not going to be successful here. Or if you don't wake up every day being totally jazzed by creating an experience for a client, well, then that's probably not going to be, where you're going to be successful.
I like that. Your specialty is financial planning and wealth management. As you think about that sphere of your focus, what's been on your mind recently as you look at the financial landscape of our nation and as financial landscape in general?
I think that when I was a kid, because I'm older than you. When I was a kid, I used to think I grew up dumb and broke in Suffern, New York. And I used to look up to people that were successful and were hardworking and go, you know what, God, that's who I want to be, or I want to be that person that makes a difference, in this world. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes to go do that. And I think the thing that I'm seeing is that there are people that we now have a culture where people who did it with just hard work and like, remember, when people say how successful you are, I go, yeah, well, any schmuck can make money who works 3 jobs, because that's what I did to get here, and I don't do that anymore. I'm not putting in routinely 75-hour weeks like I was before. I'm still working my what off, but I'm I'm not working for I don't go home, take a shower, and go back to work like I did in my 20s, or that piece. And I think in some ways this country, we now think that somehow that hard work, that somebody gave you something, or somebody that hard work, like, so you must have done something wrong to be successful. Or there should be some shame in being successful. And again, a poor person never gave me a job, And it bothers me that people that have just enough. Well, I have enough for my family. I go, well, that makes you, Keith, if that's who you are, and I know that's not who you are, but if that's the person you are, that makes you the most selfish person in the world to me, because you have just enough for yourself and no abundance for anybody else. What I want to do is I want to help people create abundance so we can help change the lives of everybody on the planet for the better, and playing the scarcity game so that everybody has less to feel better is different. And by the way, I'm not for making people feel bad, but I'm for rewarding the very least. I'm not a guy where everybody gets a trophy.
I like that trophy though.
We're going to issue a participation trophy, but we're going to also issue a trophy for the people that are doing the right thing. And I think that there's a lot of this work-life balance and other things that are just an excuse for not achieving. And then sometimes you'll hear people say, well, yeah, but we have to be about the greater good. And I got to tell you, I wake up every day thinking about the greater good. But the only way I can affect the greater good is by creating abundance in the world for everybody else. I can't create scarcity, and that's going to create abundance. And I think that we've misaligned our kids, because you sit back, going back to your kids, and then go, when you ask a parent, Keith, and you say, what do they want for their kids? The default answer is, what do you think the default answer? I want my kids to be
better than I was.
That would be an acceptable answer. The answer I'm going to say, I want my kids to be happy.
Yeah, that's true. I think my parents want a better life for us. I think you're right. I think the shift is better. I just want them to be happy. Which, what does that mean?
Well, first of all, I want my kids to be happy too. But you can't make somebody happy. That's got to come from within, not from internally, not externally. I want my kids to be hardworking, thoughtful, respectful. It's faith, family, service. That's what our core principles, founding principles in our family are. And I don't see how, making them happy is, yeah, I'd want them to be happy, but I don't want anybody to be unhappy. But I think how as a parent, or how as a boss, or how as a friend, or how as a brother, or a friend, or a colleague, how can I affect your happiness? I can't make you happy, but I can give you the tools to be happy. And I think, it goes back to our early conversation. I think the joy in life is the joy in life is the journey. It's not the arrival.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
And now a word from one of our sponsors, For Freedom Mobile. If you're using AT&T, Verizon, or T-Mobile, then you're being tracked. Mobile providers collect your location, communications, internet activity, even your financial transaction. They sell that data to anyone willing to pay for it and provide it to the government without a warrant. Switch to For Freedom Mobile, and you won't ever have to worry about big tech or Big Brother tracking you through your mobile phone again. For Freedom Mobile provides secure, unlimited talk, text, and high-speed data for just $29.99 a month, and it includes free internet roaming in over 200 countries. Sign up for the service by visiting forfreedommobile.com and using the promo code BridgeBuilders to get your first month for only $9.99. See forfreedommobile.com for details, just like the number 4, freedommobile.com. So I love what you just said, and I think there has been a shift in our country. And I don't know, how do we begin to get people to get, because I just had a guy on my show who's an engineer, and we had a great conversation about the fact that he can't find engineers anymore for his company because the ones coming out are just too dumb to be in his company. Because somebody told me they should be an engineer, but they don't have the skills or the passion to be an engineer or the smarts to be an engineer. How do we get to the point where we have dummied down education to where it is just about happiness or about participation trophies? And how do we get back to that faith, family, and focus that you just talked about?
I think it's going to be led by entrepreneurs like us. Entrepreneurs are always on the cutting edge, and that's why I'm so passionate to help entrepreneurial people create multi-generational wealth so that they can help change the focus of this country. The other thing I think also is in terms of the division is that, there's got to be somebody that can unite this country, or there's got to be some group of people that can unite this country, because I think I think that our politicians and social media and the media itself wants to pit one person against the other for ratings or for votes or for something. And I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think about somebody who truly, not for political expediency, did the right thing. I'd be knocked over if somebody on MSNBC gave Donald Trump credit for something, and I'd be knocked over if somebody on Fox gave Joe Biden credit for something, that he did good. That either of them did good. I'd probably die and have a heart attack right on the spot if that occurred. And I'm thinking, in what world are we so polarized that we only report the news or spin the news that fits our narrative? I don't think that's helpful for anybody. Where's the place where people actually give you information so you can make your own decision? I think we've stopped thinking as a country. I think we've been fed with what. And by the way, the craziest thing to me, when given facts on the other side, we dispute the facts. The very fact that half the country or the entire country only wants to accept what the Supreme Court or a federal court or a municipal court decides if they agree with the decision.
Right.
I think that's where we've got to get back to, respect for institutions, respect for people. You could disagree with somebody with what they think, but at the end of the day, I think we need to all be friends.
Right.
And
exactly.
I think that and I think the fact that people saying, I could never, not, I would, that they actively exclude people who are different. That's, to me, just another form of discrimination.
Right. You're exactly right. I don't want to go before I get a chance to have you talk to us again about your number one selling book. Tell us about your book again.
Well, I think it was a book that we came back and I said, well, what's the most, what could we do to bring the most abundance back to this country? And I think ultimately it was to put together a playbook that allows people that have an entrepreneurial mindset. That doesn't mean they own a business or they're entrepreneurs, but they have an entrepreneurial mindset to create abundance so that they would be able to impact the lives of everybody that they touched. And that the best way to do that was through entrepreneurial thinking. And that we want to change the narrative of how people think. Because I think in the world, I think people think that there's a lot of competition. And I don't think there's a lot of competition. I don't really believe in competition. I believe in differentiation. And so how do we differentiate people from other places? Or, a lot of people are saying, hey, I just want a seat at the table. And I'm saying, well, why do you want a seat at the table? I want to build my own table. Why don't we teach people to build their own table and invite other people to their table? Or, remember, it's not the problem, it's how you think about the problem. And I think the other thing we want to do for people is we want to, that so many people have, what I described as already listening ears, already seeing eyes, because the brain is only looking for what the mind is looking for. So how do we train our mind to look for other possibilities? How do we train people to be aware and to have a difference in thinking? And so one of the things like I pride myself on is that I see people for where they are, or I try to see people at least from where they are, and all their great qualities and all their flaws and all the other things. But I think one of the things that everybody deserves in their life is to have one or hopefully many people who not only see them where they are, but could see them at their highest potential and what they could be. That we could almost raise people to be the very best version of themselves. And work every day to do that. Sometimes that's what you'll hear me when I've not had a good day or I've done something. I say, hey, Mark, you could do better. That's not the best version of you. You're better than that, and that's not how you want to. It doesn't matter what somebody else did. That's not who I want to be. And are we perfect? No, I'm far from perfect. but I aspire to be perfect. I aspire to be better. I aspire to be a better version of myself tomorrow than I am today. And I think that that's all we can ask for people. And I think too many people have given up or don't have the tools necessary to be able to become the light in the life that they choose, that they wish they could be.
I love that. I love talking to you, Mark. You are so inspirational in just the way you think about things, the way you view other people, and the way you want to invest in others so that they can invest in others. And we can, like you say, expand generational wealth around the world. But I want to know from you, as you think about the impact that you've already had and the impact you're going to have in the future, what message do you want to leave with the world that long surpasses you?
I'm not the most reflective person in the world. And I think when you think about that, you think about death, which is not something I control, and I'm not looking to happen in the near future, at least. Although we don't get out of none of us get out of here alive. I'd like to say there's no right way to do the wrong thing, or I think that the idea is that that he made a difference in the lives. I said it earlier before. I sort of been my mantra. It's like is he made a difference in the lives of all the people he touched, and that the multiplier effect. There's a money multiplier effect that drives our economy. And I think that hopefully that I had my small role at a people multiplier, in that what I'm so proud of, Keith, is I'm proud of not the money we've made and the abundance we've created and the car I drive or the amount of money in my bank account or all those other things. I think it's all amazing and far more than a guy who grew up in Suffolk, New York should have. But I think that what I'm proudest of is the small little things that we've been able to do, the amount of people we've hired that have been able to send their kids to college or buy the house they wanted to buy, or to be able to take a company and help them to grow that company where they created hundreds of jobs. And then that multiplier created hundreds more jobs and more abundance and more, like the people multiplier, so that everybody's life became better because of the small little things that you did, that one little thing, one little kindness. Even today, you could say something to somebody that's nasty and ruin their entire day. It happens all the time to people, right?
Right.
So if that's the case, well, then shouldn't it be that you have the chance that one kind thing to somebody can change their outlook for the day and how they respond to other people? So that just that one kind word that you say to somebody impacts them, so that they, instead of them being in a bad mood, they're in a great mood to impact 5 other people in their lives that day. Just the small little difference that we all make. And I think they go, what am I? I'm one person on a planet of 7 billion people. You're one person. What am I going to do? And on one level, that's overwhelming. But on the other level, it's amazing how one person can make a difference. There's a reason why one of my favorite movies, I love all the mob movies, Godfather and Goodfellas and, all those, movies like that. I'm a big fan of that. But if
you are from Jersey, so
yeah. Well, but I'm saying, if you really ask what my favorite movies are, you asked about books, is my favorite movie. I love Back to the Future, where when Michael J. Fox is, his family was going down the wrong direction, but just one little thing changed the whole trajectory of his family's history. Or I like It's a Wonderful Life. You get to see that around Christmas time, where Jimmy Stewart saw what his life would be like if he wasn't on the planet. That's probably my favorite movie of all time. I love one of my fraternity brothers, who's probably 10 years older than I am, Angelo Pizzo, wrote and directed Rudy and Hoosiers. Where the small little town can have all the glory of a large school. Or Rudy, the ultimate underdog story. How a guy like Rudy could ever play a down at Notre Dame is it was almost an unbelievable story if it wasn't true. And so I think that the idea is that there's always hope, and there's always hope that when you still have hope, you still have the ability to succeed.
I love that. So, Mark, where can people find your book, The Ultimate Investment, and connect with you on social media?
They can find it on Amazon. They can reach me by email at mark_Murphy@northeastprivate.com. And as I said, I'm happy to continue the conversation with you anytime or any one of your listeners. And, as I said, I just want to be continued to be known as the guy that helps people create multi-generational wealth.
Well, Mark,
or the people that have multi-generational wealth, help them keep it.
Well, Mark, thanks so much. I really enjoyed talking to you. And again, you always provide my audience with such inspirational content and advice. So thank you for what you do, and blessings on helping people to look for that next generation and create generational wealth in their lives and the lives of their families.
Well, right back at you. It feels good to be in the company of a man of such high integrity and character, and a man of faith like yourself. And so I consider it my blessing and my honor to spend this time with you.
Well, thank you, Mark. Have a great day.
Thank you, my friend.
Thanks for listening to Becoming Bridge Builder. If you enjoyed this episode and want to help support the podcast, please subscribe and share it with others. Post about it on social media or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from me, you can follow me on Instagram @bkeithhaney and on Getter and Twitter @RevHeadpin, or on his website at alightbreaksthrough.org. Thanks again, and tune in next time.
Do you know that most entrepreneurs hit a revenue ceiling and have no idea why? They're working harder, spending more money, running more ads, but revenue stays flat. My friend Dr. Noah St. John calls this the invisible break. He's giving our listeners a free revenue ceiling audit to help you see what's really holding you back. You'll get a free 30-day membership to NoahBot, giving you access to Dr. Noah's 30 years of experience to help you reach your next level. But hurry, because there's only 50 available this month. So if you're tired of being stuck at the same revenue level and want to finally break through, get your free revenue ceiling audit at drnoahvault.com in the affiliate link that'll be listed in the show notes.